The Ethiopian Prime Minister says his landlocked country will get direct access to a port. Abiy Ahmed wants to increase economic growth, but how far is he prepared to go? And what could Ethiopia's neighbours offer? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finighan. Ethiopia has been landlocked since Eritrea gained its independence in 1993. For 30 years, it's been dependent upon its neighbours, especially Djibouti, for access to ports and international shipping routes. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says the high costs are unsustainable. He's reportedly said that Ethiopia will secure direct access to a port peacefully or, if necessary, by force. What does he mean? And what are the implications for neighbouring nations? We'll be discussing all of this in a few moments with our guests. But first, a report from Victoria Gatenby.
The port of Djibouti is situated on one of the busiest shipping routes in the world. 95% of Ethiopia's imports and exports pass through here. Ethiopia has been landlocked since Eritrea gained independence in 1993. The port of Assab handled two-thirds of Ethiopia's trade for 5 years, until war broke out between the neighbours in 1998. Since then, it's relied on other ports in the region. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says the status quo is costly and unsustainable. He wants Ethiopia to have a port of its own. He reportedly told a meeting of investors and businessmen last week that Ethiopia will get a port by peaceful means, but if that fails, it'll use force. In a bid to tap into shipping routes, the government's recently started negotiations with its neighbours and has reportedly offered Eritrea a 30% stake in the national carrier in exchange for direct access to its port. Ethiopia has one of the fastest growing economies in the world. In its 2023 World Economic Outlook, the International Monetary Fund predicted GDP will increase 13.5% this year. But the government says development is being held back. It seems determined to address this, something neighbouring countries will be following closely. Victoria Gatenby for Inside Story.
So let's bring in our guests for today's discussion. From Addis Ababa, we're joined by Kemal Hashi Mohamoud, a member of the Ethiopian Parliament. In London is Martin Plaut, a journalist specialising in the Horn of Africa. He's also a fellow at the Institute of Commonwealth Studies at the University of London. And from Washington, D.C., we're joined by Kwaku Nuamah, who is a senior lecturer and chairman of the International Peace and Conflict Resolution Programme at the American University. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Kemal Hashi Mohamoud, let's start with you. Let's clear up something right from the start. Did Abiy Ahmed actually say that he'd get access to a port by peaceful means, negotiation, or by force if necessary? And if he did make those remarks, how seriously should we take them?
Thank you for hosting this show. I know, it has been reported by certain bodies that the Prime Minister has stayed by force or by peace. I never heard of that in any of his speech, and I don't even expect that from the Prime Minister, and I don't think that is true. It shows everything he has been doing since he came to the leadership. That doesn't show that he goes for force. He's been working with all the neighboring countries in strengthening the peace, the cooperation, and also of win-win relationship, because with all the neighboring countries in Ethiopia, we don't only share borders, we also share nationalities. A lot of ethnicities who are Ethiopians, we do have the same community in the neighboring countries. So there is no way a port should be an option, but the necessity of the port is very clear and crucial. And I think the government should find all the peaceful means that we can really make sure that Ethiopia can also access the port, to make sure that the growing nations of Ethiopia now who are like more than 120 million will be in a better economic growing.
All right. Martin, what do you make of this? Is this the kind of thing that Abiy Ahmed would say? And if he did say this, perhaps he was misinterpreted?
Well, it is possible that he was misinterpreted, but quite frankly, if you have the media in Ethiopia reporting this and it's incorrect, you would expect the Ethiopian government to put out an official statement saying, no, this is wrong, this is not what we believe. So I think we have to assume that he did say it. I mean, frankly, it is slightly unhinged. You know, it's interesting, we've just come through a war between Eritrea and Ethiopia combined just against the region of Tigray, and they weren't able to defeat the Tigrayans. They had to end up with a peace agreement, which was on both terms, shall we say, on the terms of both sides. So, you know, the idea that the Ethiopians are going to project force and defeat who? Eritrea, Djibouti, Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, I don't know, but it seems pretty unlikely. I think it's just one of those things that he might have said off the top of his head.
Yeah, when I meant misinterpreted, could he perhaps have been talking about economic force? I mean, you know, there he is in charge of an economy which has got, what, 13.5% predicted GDP this year. A growth of GDP.
Yes, but one's got to be a bit careful of that figure, because that figure really is a rebound from the war. I mean, the growth rates are probably only about 7 or 8% a year. I mean, they're still substantial. They're very good growth rates, and Ethiopia certainly needs to have access to the sea. I'm not arguing about that, but there's no need to go around demanding it by force. I mean, there's no reason why anybody would deny him.
Kwaku, what do you make of it? How seriously should we take Abiy Ahmed?
I just hope that for his own sake and for the sake of Africa that he was just joking, or that he was misquoted, because there's no way that he could grab somebody's port and get away with it. It's not going to stand. It will trigger international and regional sanctions right away, and Ethiopia doesn't need this type of disruption anymore. After the war, they've got a lot of work to do, and he doesn't need this kind of disruption.
So who, Kwaku, would these comments have been aimed at in the first place? Eritrea, perhaps, or a domestic audience? I mean, if it was Eritrea, I thought relations were on a much better footing with Eritrea since the 2018 peace deal.
It can only be for domestic consumption, because there's nothing to be gained from threatening any of his neighbors. Eritrea, he has good relations with Eritrea. The relationship is not exactly where it should be, but if he has hopes of using Assab, which is probably the port that they want to use to export some of the stuff that's coming out of central Ethiopia, he cannot be threatening them. He's already trying to renegotiate deals with Djibouti, which is a place where he needs to focus on, and he's getting all these other deals going with Kenya, trying to develop a port at Lamu, and even Sudan. Talks were started with the regime that has been ousted in Sudan. Those are the kinds of things that he needs to be doing. If he's doing this for domestic consumption, it's dangerous, and it can also lead to unintended consequences inside of Eritrea itself. The regime in Eritrea is unpredictable, and they can seize on such comments to try and build legitimacy by, muscling out some of the actors that they think in league with the government in Addis Ababa, even though they themselves seem to have worked out their relationship, because they have a common enemy in the TPLF, in the Tigray nationalists. But this can be dangerous on both sides.
Kemal, I mean, picking up on what Kwaku was saying there, can Ethiopia afford a military conflict right now? I mean, if it came to that over a port, we're all saying that possibly it wouldn't go that far, that the Prime Minister's comments are to be taken with a pinch of salt here, but Ethiopia just simply can't afford it right now, can it?
Well, I don't think it's an issue of affordability. Ethiopia doesn't need conflict at all. You know, the history of Ethiopia, there's no time that Ethiopia has been aggressive or has started any war. In all the wars it had so far, it's only kind of defending its sovereignty and defend the nation. So I don't see why even we assume it. Like earlier, Martin said, let's assume the Prime Minister has said, by force. You could never say that. As the other guest said, it's a very dangerous thing, and nothing going on at the ground now can justify that Prime Minister has said. Look at all the connections. We're offering electricity to neighboring countries. We are giving even water to neighboring countries. You can see a lot of agreements happening with all the regional countries. I don't really see where this is coming. Everything the Prime Minister has been doing since he came to power is totally opposite to this term being, reported with some other, news outlets. They're not even that much official or well-known media platforms. So it's not an issue of affordability. Ethiopia will never, history doesn't tell us Ethiopia comes against any kind of, peaceful environment. It's never been aggressive. Okay. So it's not an issue of affordability, but Ethiopia doesn't need any kind of conflict with neighboring countries.
Martin.
This government, its main policy is, depending on neighbor relations, mutual growth, mutual relations.
Martin, the US has recently lifted sanctions after concluding that Ethiopia is no longer engaging in a pattern of gross violations of human rights. Do you think that Abiy Ahmed would have made comments such as the ones that he has been reported to have made about the use of force if those sanctions had still been in place?
It's a very good question, especially as there are still many examples of gross human rights abuses by Ethiopia, which the United States certainly knows about. I mean, it is slightly odd because the Chinese have just renewed the rail connections with Djibouti, and they're pretty good now. And there's no reason why that shouldn't be developed. And as has been said, the Eritrean ports of Assab and of Massawa are both available and could be used. And the Lamu port in Kenya has been talked about, and the Ethiopians have put some money into that, and it's possible that they could get something in Sudan or even Somalia. So there are lots of options. But I mean, I'm afraid that Prime Minister Abiy tends to have these delusions of grandeur. And he make these strange statements. I mean, I don't know if you know, but he's just building himself a $10 billion palace. Why? The country doesn't need it. He doesn't need it. Why is he doing it? I have no idea.
And
and also he's talked about starting an Ethiopian navy. I mean, where's he going to put this?
I was going to ask you, does this talk of using force for a port? I mean, obviously, Ethiopia needs a port for economic reasons. But do you think that, in Abiy Ahmed's mind, that he has a view to restarting an Ethiopian navy?
Well, yes, absolutely. That is exactly what he has said. And the French at one time said that they would help him to do this and would rebuild it. I mean, the port was started with the help of the British in what is now independent Eritrea, and they had, I think it was 3 or 4 bases there in the islands. It had in Assab and in Massawa. And Ethiopia had a pretty good little navy. I mean, it was very well run, and there was, unfortunately, when Eritrea became independent, they lost the base, so that went astray. But let's not forget that Assab has been used by foreign nations to project power. The Saudis and the UAE both used it during the war against the Houthi in Yemen. So it's not as if Eritrea is opposed to having naval foreign bases on its soil. It could be done, but you'd have to negotiate it, and saying you're going to use force is crazy.
Kwaku, picking up on what Martin was saying just a few moments ago, where do you think that Ethiopia would be looking to build its port? In Eritrea and Djibouti? Of course, Djibouti has a virtual monopoly over maritime trade in the region. Or this port in Somaliland, which geographically is closest to Addis. Would Berbera make sense from a strategic perspective? What are the ramifications for that, though, for Somalia and Eritrea if Ethiopia were to build this port in Somaliland?
So Berbera makes sense because of proximity, but building there it's a de facto recognition of the independence of Somaliland, and that's not good. That's not going to fly in the African Union. But the way to get around that is to work within IGAD, and so you probably have to solve the secession problem before Berbera becomes a real option, because you don't want Ethiopia going behind the African Union and recognizing Somaliland whilst Somalia is still contesting that. And so Djibouti, I think Djibouti is the other place that, because it already has the logistics, it already has the relationship with Djibouti. I understand that the port fees are very high, but you negotiate, you talk about that. And if relations with Eritrea is getting better, Assab is also a possibility. It's close to central Ethiopia, where the industrial parks are. And so that's what you do. You don't threaten anybody. You don't make reckless statements that can reignite conflict in an already turbulent region. That helps nobody. So that's what I think they need to do. Sit down and renegotiate the port fees in Djibouti, talk to Eritrea, try and get access to the ports in Massawa and Assab, and then maybe look at the Lamu option. But Berbera, you really have to be careful how you do that, because that will be de facto recognition of a seceding country.
Kemal, what do you, as a member of the Ethiopian Parliament, make of these reports that Eritrea was offered a stake in Ethiopian Airlines in return for a deal over its port in Assab? I understand that deal is now off the table, but what do you make of the fact that it was even discussed?
Well, I think I would speak of the situation from the Ethiopian side. You know, the fact that Ethiopia is not accessing to a port was unfair and unfortunate. Ethiopia will do whatever is possible to the peaceful means to access to a port. I see guests speaking of options to the neighboring countries. So I'm very sure that the government will check on the other neighboring countries in any way that they can access to a very win relationship. By making sure that they can give anything we have as a country in return of accessing to a port. As the situation with Eritrea, what is the discussion, where is it going on? I think they're going to be very official, and which I can't have a word on it, but I'm pretty much sure that the government will do whatever is possible in a very peaceful manner to access the port. And it doesn't matter, again, from Eritrea or Somalia, or Djibouti. Like, accessing the port is very mandatory, given the situation now where we are going. And as the fact of about the Navy and everything, and also the Palestine, Matthew earlier mentioned, let's have the fact, Ethiopia is in the verge of growth in a very world-class standard, like it's being very proactive, make sure that the nation thinks of one step ahead, to make sure that everything we do in a world class, be very proactive to whatever comes, and to make sure that all infrastructures, security and development are in a very world class standard. And I don't see why that worries anyone of being proactive, whether it is the Navy or any other development. So I think that should be welcomed in a very positive manner, and we need to give the credit for doing that, the leading government.
Martin, what do you make of those reports about the stake in Ethiopian Airlines being offered to Eritrea? And do you want to? You started to expand upon, or would you like to expand upon your thoughts about where Ethiopia would want to site this port?
Well, I mean, I think if I was an Eritrean, I'd be delighted to have a stake in as successful a project as Ethiopian Airlines. It's one of the really successful airlines in Africa. Once it was, fighting with Kenyan Airlines, South African Airlines, but it's streets ahead of everybody else now, and it is fantastically well run. It certainly was until very recently. And let's see. I mean, I would be very happy to have that if I was an Eritrean, but I would be surprised if Ethiopia was prepared to give it up. I mean, I still think that the port of Assab, which has been lying essentially unused since the border war in 1998 to 2000 with Eritrea. And all you have to do is basically rehabilitate it, send back the Ethiopians who used to live there and used to act as the stevedores, and provide a lot of employment locally. It would be a great idea, and it would earn money for the Eritreans. And there's one other thing, which is that there's a huge potash deposit on the border between Eritrea and Ethiopia in the Afar region. And there's no reason why that should not be developed. Now, the Chinese have taken a big stake in it. That would mean building another port, probably, because it's such a big project. It's a 200-year project. So there are lots of things that they could cooperate on, but it does require talking, and waving a big stick and saying you're going to use force is not the way forward.
You mentioned China, Martin. What about Gulf nations and their continuing engagement in the Horn of Africa? What does that mean for Ethiopia's plans?
Well, it does mean that they are competitors, but I mean, they're competitors with everybody. The UAE has huge investments in a lot of the ports. For example, they had a big stake in Djibouti. They've got stakes in the Somali ports. And yes, of course, you've got to fight for your commercial rights, shall we say, within this. But I mean, these should be peaceful competitions, and there's no reason why the ports shouldn't be developed and should become very successful. I mean, the Horn of Africa has huge potential, but it does need to learn to live with itself in a peaceful way. And if that can happen, there's no reason why it shouldn't develop and become a real boon to the whole of Africa.
Kwaku, as Martin was saying, that the region has huge potential. Is large-scale economic integration, do you think, a possibility in the near future, or a pipe dream? Can neighbouring nations benefit from Ethiopia's rapid economic growth riding on its coattails?
Absolutely. And Ethiopia is the largest country over there, 120 million people expected to double in population in 30 years. The economy is growing. And because it needs its neighbors, because it doesn't have access to the sea, there is interdependence built into that relationship. And so with a little bit of creative thinking, you could have a regional economy that works for everybody. And they need to talk, and Ethiopia cannot be threatening anybody. It already has problems with Egypt over the dam. It doesn't need any more conflict. And so regional organizations like, IGAD needs to get involved. They've been talking a lot about promoting regional trade, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area initiatives. Everybody talks about promoting intra-African trade. This is a golden opportunity to solve problems and create jobs for everybody in the region, and everybody can benefit if they work together. So no, we don't need threats. We don't need conflict.
All right, Kwaku. If we assume for a moment that his comments were directed at a domestic audience, they weren't for international consumption. You mentioned tension with Egypt. Do you think that Abiy Ahmed is the man to, while his plans are perhaps necessary as far as economic growth in Ethiopia is concerned, do you think that Abiy Ahmed is the man who can negotiate a deal, the right deal for Ethiopia and the region?
Well, he did win a Nobel Peace Prize, so I hope that he can make peace again. He's made peace with neighbors before. He made peace with Eritrea. He made peace with Sudan. He made peace with Djibouti. So he can do so again. And I hope that people in his party at home are encouraging him to seek cooperation. And also, remember, he made this statement in front of investors. No foreign investor wants to move to a region where there's conflict. And so this is one of the ways to scare off foreign direct investment. He needs to stop that talk and figure out how to make peace. And I think that because he's made peace in the past, he can do so again.
Martin, would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, one of the interesting things is actually the relationship with Egypt has now improved. They have agreed to find some way of dealing with the key issue, which is the Grand Renaissance Dam, which was built on the Blue Nile, and which the Egyptians and the Sudanese were very worried about. But it's only a hydroelectric dam. It's not going to use the water for Ethiopian irrigation. So the Egyptians now seem to be a bit more happy about it, and it's going to produce a lot of electricity, some of which will be available in Sudan, maybe further afield. And so you begin to see an alternative for Ethiopia where it ties into the region, develops the region, works with the region, and is a dynamo for growth. And that is certainly a possibility. But one of the big problems is that one of the neighbors in Eritrea, President Isaias, is very unpredictable. And you can never be sure when he's going to stir up conflict again. So, it's a tough region, hard to work in, but it can be done. And Ethiopia, could be a bastion of both development and peace if it's led in the right way.
But I come back, Martin, to my very first question, the question I asked some 25 minutes ago about whether the Prime Minister should be taken seriously here. Obviously not.
Well, you always have to take a Prime Minister seriously, but I would always judge people more by their actions than by their words. Let's not forget that when they fomented a war against Tigray, they plotted it for 2 years. It was a 2-year preparation by Ethiopia and Eritrea to attack Tigray. They never mentioned it. So let's look at the actions rather than the words.
OK. There, gentlemen, I'm afraid we have to end it. Many thanks to you all, Kemal, Hashi, Mohamoud, Martin Plaut and Kwaku Nuamah. As always, thank you for watching. You can see the programme again at any time by going to the website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, join us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can join the conversation on Twitter, our handle at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finighan, and the team here in Doha, thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Bye for now.